Welcome to our continuing series, Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis, Depression, Part 5, from Sri Aurobindo. It is indeed good that the psychic intervened and prevented the mind from taking the wrong direction. It is not possible that there should not be stumbles, failures, etc., in the work of self-purification and change, but to feel upset or remorseful over them is harmful rather than helpful. It easily brings depression, and depression brings clouding of the mind and weakness. To observe calmly the wrong movement and its nature. Here it was the tongue that was at fault, and the tongue is always an easily erring member. And to set it right inwardly is always the best way. Calm, especially when the true spiritual calm of the self is there, is the thing that must always be preserved. With that, everything else can be done in time and with the least trouble. Remorse, repentance, is the natural movement of the vital mind when it sees it has done a mistake. It is certainly better than indifference. Its disadvantage is that it disturbs the vital stuff and sometimes leads to depression or discouragement. For that reason, what is usually recommended to the sadhak is a quiet recognition of the mistake, with a sincere aspiration and will that it should not be repeated, or at least that the habit of making such mistakes should soon be eliminated. At a higher stage of development, when the inner calm is established, one simply observes the defects of the nature as defects of a machinery that one has to put right, and calls down the light and force for its rectification. In the beginning, however, the movement of repentance even helps, provided it does not bring discouragement or depression. The vital mind is part of the vital. If mind, mental mind, vital mind, physical mind, subconscious mind, does not respond to outer things, depression is possible. The self at one end, the stone at the other, never get into depression. And between them, the true mind, true vital, true physical consciousness never get depression because they do not give responses to things that create depression. You seem to rely very much on X and his experiences and ideas about them. X's experience proves nothing because he is quite ignorant. His depression comes from outside and has its causes. Only his vital mind does not record or understand the causes, but there is a response to them all the same. Because the vital mind has, in the past, always associated depression with these causes, and that impression remains in the vital stuff, so it responds to their touch with the usual reaction taught to it by the vital mind. An ignorant and untrained mind like X's cannot be expected to realize the secret machinery of the movements of his own consciousness. After you went from here, it seems that the vital difficulties which you were emerging from here came back with your return to the atmosphere, and that was the cause of the violent depression and ill health that fell upon you. The depression, again, was the cause why everything went wrong, and the arrangements made fell through or took a wrong turn. For depression prevents the force from flowing through and calls in the adverse forces and gives them a chance to destroy the helpful formations that are made. All the trouble and difficulty you have had will disappear or be minimized if you shake off this tendency to depression altogether. However, or from wheresoever it came, the only thing to do with the depression is to throw it out. The gloom and other difficulties come from a resistance of inertia in the lower vital and physical consciousness. What you have to do is to prepare the consciousness by getting rid of the inertia. A sattvic gladness and calm and confidence is the proper temperament for this yoga. Gloom, depression, and weeping should not be indulged in, as they stand in the way of the opening. Unless the tears are the psychic weeping of release, or adoration, or removed love and bhakti. The progress made in controlling the sex and other rajasic movements of the lower vital is a good preparation, but not enough. By itself it is only the negative side, though indispensable. Aspire for a positive sattvic opening for strength, for light, for peace, and do not worry or repine if the progress is slow at first, nor grudge the time and labor of preparation necessary before there can be a rapid advance in the yoga. This movement is one that always tries to come when you have a birthday or a darshan, and is obviously a suggestion of forces that want to disturb you and give you a bad birthday or a bad darshan. You must get rid of the idea that it is in any way helpful for sadhana, that is, makes you remember the divine, etc. If it does, it makes you remember the divine in the wrong way, and in addition, brings up the weakness, also depression, self-distrust, etc., etc. This is a very common disease with the sadhaks, making comparisons with feelings of jealousy and envy. In some, it leads to revolt and self-assertion. In others, to self-depreciation and depression. Naturally, these feelings are quite out of place, and the judgments created are out of focus. Each sadhak has his own movement, his own relation with the divine, his own place in the work or the general sadhana, and to compare with others immediately brings in a wrong standard. It is on the truth of his own inner movement that he has to take his base, Swadharma. As for the rest, you have rightly said, I must preserve my equanimity and a faith in divine guidance when falsehood or any trouble or difficulty confronts me. The defect that opened the way to the bodily and other troubles was the faltering in your resolution to conquer the vital and follow the straight and high path, and the consequent violent despair and depression it brought in its wake. Let these disappear altogether, and do not allow them to rise in that way again. The path of spiritual calm and strength, and the consecration of all your forces to the divine, is the one safe way for you, and that you must now consistently follow. To yield to depression when things go wrong is the worst way of meeting the difficulty. There must be some desire or demand within you, conscious or subconscious, that gets excited and revolts against its not being satisfied. The best way is to be conscious of it, face it calmly, and steadily throw it out. The vital may understand, but that is not enough. It must wholeheartedly call for the peace and transformation. There must be a large part of it unable to change its position and give up its moods or its way of receiving things. Otherwise, these depressions could not be so acute. There is no reason why you should not get the peace, but this must change. Evidently, the condition into which you have fallen is due to an upsurging of suppressed elements in the lower vital nature. It has been compelled by the mind and the higher vital part in you to give up the little joys and pleasures to which it was habituated. But it, or at any rate the subconscious part of it, which is often the most powerful, did that without entire conviction, and probably with reservations and safeguards, and in exchange for a promise of compensations, other and greater joys and pleasures, to replace all it was losing. This is evident from what you write. Your description of the nature of the depression, the return of what you call impure thoughts, which are merely indices of the subconscious lower vital desire complex, the doubt thrown upon the generosity of the divine, the demand for compensation for losses, something like striking a bargain with the divine, a quid pro quo pact, are all unmistakable. Lately there has been a combination of circumstances which have rather suddenly increased the deprivation of its former outlets. This attack is its way of non-cooperation or protest. There is only one way to deal with it: to cast the whole thing away, depression, demands, doubts, sex thoughts, the whole undesirable baggage, and have in its place the one true movement, the call for the consciousness and the presence of the divine.